Hey, it's Ken Perry, back with another episode of Lessons from Last Time. I want to give you a bit of a warning on this specific podcast. So Andrea, who I brought in to meet with me and talk about overcoming struggles and overcoming really difficult situations, was an employee here at the Knowledge Coop. She was actually my assistant for years, and I got to watch her really grow as a human while she was here. It was an amazing experience, and so I asked her to come back and share her story. What ended up happening in the episode you're about to see is we got really into a story that can be difficult to listen to. And so I wanted to give you just a heads up before you listen to this, that it deals with some pretty serious situations. Andrea went to school at Columbine. She was in the building and talks about that. And so I just wanted you to have that, information going into this. Just know that this is a lot more serious. We don't talk mortgage at all in this podcast. And actually, we had considered not releasing this podcast because it does deal with very serious matters. But in the end, it also has some really valuable insight, some really valuable information. And I think her story is incredibly powerful. So enjoy the podcast episode. Listen, I just wanted to give you that heads up. And I appreciate you continually coming in here, downloading and listening to the podcast. Hope you enjoy. All right, it's time for the most casual conversation of them all because I know her so well. I have got Andrea here. Thank you so much for coming in. I've never called you Andrea. This is Dre, the Dre dog. Exactly. So many nicknames. And Andrea has actually worked with me for years. Mm-hmm. And so I've got her here, and this conversation is going to be amazing. So I want to start by saying thank you for even being here, because you have an insanely powerful story. You're still learning all about your story. You've lived a life, and I've gotten to experience a lot of things with you. And so thank you for being willing to be here. And you said, when you first walked in, you said you didn't know why you were here because you don't do mortgages.
Exactly.
But I think you're going to bring a lot of perspective for everybody. So first, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Are you nervous?
A little bit.
Are you? I was nervous. I was interviewed on mine. I was so nervous for mine. I'm like, what is he going to ask?
I know.
Well, we'll keep it super.
So I trust you.
Yeah. So let's go kind of open up, I guess, the big stuff early. So when you first applied to work at the Knowledge Coop, and I don't even know, was it called the Knowledge Coop back then? I think it was Broker Knowledge Group back then when you first got on. It may have just launched.
I think it had just changed.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't remember. I know I was with you in 2013, and I can't remember if I had been there in 2012 or not, but definitely 2013.
So when that happened, I remember I was in Las Vegas, and I was at a conference, and I got this call that I had an interview that I was going to do. And interviewing an assistant at the time, that is the interview for me. That's one of the most important roles because it's the person that's going to get to know me well. I have to be able to communicate effectively with them. They need to communicate effectively with me, but I have to like them.
Exactly.
And so you can have all the qualities you want, but if I don't like talking to you, it's not going to be a great role.
It's a big fit. Yeah.
Yeah. So we connected immediately. It was I was like, oh my gosh, I just met my best friend. It was just easy to talk to you. But I remember looking at your resume and doing math. And so let's start with the big one first. I did the math on when you had graduated from Columbine. I had been there the year before everything happened, and that's when I was a debate coach, and I was coaching a debate tournament there. I always wonder if I saw you when I was there.
Yeah, I know. Because
I'll never know. But
no.
Yeah, you were. What year were you when?
So when the event happened, it was end of junior year.
So you would have been 17. A sophomore when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the year after that, so I see that you were going to Columbine when that happened, and immediately I went, oh, she has a story.
Yeah.
And then, since then, obviously I've learned more, but why don't you tell us a little bit about just kind of the facts of you went to Columbine during the shooting. Start there.
Yes. I went to Columbine all 4 years. I did homeschool my senior year due to what happened. Yes, I was in the school the day of the shooting. And I did hear what I learned to be gunshots. I heard loud noises, as did everyone else in the class. We actually had a substitute teacher that day who was a teacher prior to that we knew well, and he was actually, I believe he was ex-military, so he did recognize what those sounds were. So he just told us that we needed to stay put. I remember asking if I could go to the restroom, and he was just like, absolutely not, stay put. And just a lot of us were questioning what it was.
Did you have to go, or were you like, I want to see what's happening out there?
I just wanted to see what was happening. And my high school sweetheart and our mutual best friend were in the library at the time, which didn't mean anything to me yet, but that ended up being like the worst place to be. And then at one point, we kind of heard things coming closer, but they didn't come through our door, even though they kind of, I guess, were shooting around us. But I guess as they heard things coming closer, they kind of found like a hallway, so they decided to exit us. So kind of single file, as I recall. Some of it's blurry. They just sort of got us out, I believe, through a hallway and outside. And then they just sort of told us to run. And the only way, it was close to like a park. And then actually my home was across the street from that park. So the only way to like get to that park was a large chain link fence. So they basically said, like, climb that fence and run. And I just acted very bizarre. I was like, my boyfriend and my friend are in there. And they were like, Andrea, it doesn't matter. You need to go. So I just climbed the fence. Everything was kind of slow motion and just surreal.
Why do I feel like you were thrown over the fence?
Yeah. So I climbed it, and I think somebody was boosting me up and helping me. Because of course I was like wearing like wedge heels. You know?
Of course.
Because, you know, I've always been super girly. And so I think somebody was boosting me up because I wasn't behaving well, because for some reason I felt necessary to run in back into the school. So I believe I fell over the fence, because then later I was like, why is my bottom so bruised? And the substitute teacher told my mom later, yeah, she was basically boosted and thrown over the fence. So she fell pretty hard. And that's why she's so bruised. And then teachers were basically saying, run like hell, like go. So all the students were just sort of running. And again, it was very surreal and very slow motion. And I think everyone was just trying to help each other. People were kind of like losing shoes, and you know, we were all just scared. A football player kind of helped me, you know, I think he kind of like picked me up at one point, just helped me run faster. And we were all just kind of trying to help each other. Again, we kind of just ran into the neighborhood across the street, which happened to be mine. And I was literally like the first cul-de-sac that was right across the street. So a lot of people ran to my house. And my mom said she'd never forget the look on my face. It was just pale and like complete fear. And she's like, what's going on? And she heard all the ambulances, and we tried explaining it. And then our house just became completely open to all the kids trying to use the phone to contact parents, and then parents coming there to look for their children. And then the elementary school eventually tried to open it up for parents and kids trying to find each other. And then basically different news stations ended up at our house trying to report things. Eventually the SWAT team landed there to try to figure out what they were going to do. So it was just sort of an open house.
So you didn't totally escape the madness. It's still all around you.
It was everywhere. Yeah. And it was bizarre because most of the students were crying and just freaked out, which is, I believe a pretty normal reaction. And I was just very stoic, and I was getting very upset that people were crying, and I don't know why that was my reaction. I don't know if I was just, I know I was in complete shock, and I guess I just didn't, I don't know if I just didn't want it to be happening.
When there's no cell phones back there, so you can't get a text from your boyfriend or your friend. There's
right.
So you just waited and
that, yeah. So it was just, I was so directly affected. And what I kept, telling my mom was, if my boyfriend was okay, and for whatever reason, he just couldn't get to me or figure out where I was, there would be some way he would get a message to me to let me know he was okay. I just knew that. That's just who he was. He was brilliant. I just knew it. And as time was passing and I wasn't getting that message, I knew something was wrong. And because there was many news stations there, they can be pretty aggressive. And she just, one of the news ladies just said, I'll try to find out if you're willing to interview.
Oh, it's a trade.
If we do find out. And at that point I was like, fine. If you can find out, I'll interview. And honestly, that ended up kind of being a good thing because he had family like in Oklahoma where he was from. So at least they could know if I found out he was okay. So I finally got the news that he had been shot, but he was alive. And I didn't know about our friend because I knew they were together. So, and then I said, I need you to find out about our friend. And she was able to just tell me it was bad. So I was able to give that interview just about my boyfriend. I don't believe I said anything about the friend. And then it was just kind of a blur from there. It was just about me trying to get to the hospital. And of course that was chaos because I just don't think at that time anybody knew how to handle that situation. There had been school shootings in the past, but at that point, that was the biggest school shooting there had ever been. So it was just complete chaos. And I eventually did find out what hospital my high school sweetheart was in, and I was able to get through and see him. Luckily, the places he was shot were very minor. So he was able to make a full recovery and he was fine. But as soon as I entered his room, he was a wreck from what he witnessed in the library, which was the worst place to be. That was where I think primarily most of the students were killed, and where both of the shooters were killed or, died as well. So, but as soon as I entered his room, he was just started crying and just gave me very, very specific and morbid details of what happened in the library and told me our friend was dead and just kept repeating like all the blood, all the blood, all the blood.
Didn't your friend, wasn't he like covering somebody or protecting somebody?
Yeah, he was. Everybody just said he was a hero, and yeah, I think he was like laying on top of another girl, which yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure he was shot multiple times, and so.
So you're in all of this with, I mean, everybody's got their own experience. One of my favorite comments that came out of the last few years is we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. You know, you had this similar experience to a lot of other people.
Exactly.
But everybody handles that differently.
Yeah. None of us can say we know how the other person feels, even though we were all there that day. Because we all handle things differently, and we all had completely different experiences and stories. And
you became, at that point, because of your connection with the media, because they were there, you kind of became the spokesperson in some cases. Not an official spokesperson, but I know that you were interviewed a lot. Yeah. And you were recently, were you interviewed like in the last few years or something? For some reason I remember you being part of a anniversary type thing.
I did something with OPB. It was like a radio thing several years ago.
Everything feels like it's a couple days ago for
I
me.
know, I know.
But you were kind of featured a lot. So how did you bring, like, did you become the girl who was in Columbine at that point? Because there's so much more to you, and we're going to get into everything else. But were you kind of seen as that person?
Yeah, and I think it was because of my boyfriend being shot. And so he was, photographed a lot and in the media a lot. And I was by his side a lot. So I was photographed with him a lot. So I think that's why. And, he has, or I guess had his own story and struggles, and kind of got hooked on painkillers and went down his own path of becoming an addict with drugs, and then getting clean and becoming like a spokesperson. And he's a very intelligent, very well-spoken, great speaker, and turned his life around, and I think even started like his own recovery center.
Oh, wow.
So since he was in the public eye, they'd always kind of post certain photographs that were very impactful. And there's one photograph, and it's of us together. So yeah, I would always, and then people would be like, oh yeah, Andrea too, and stuff like that.
How much because I know your parents, I like your parents a lot. And how much I think now as a dad a lot, right? I was just talking to somebody about this.
Yeah.
When you're before you have kids, you think one way, and then once I became a dad, everything becomes looking through the eyes of fathers in different scenarios.
Yes.
How do your parents deal with that at that moment?
It was, it took me a while to realize how that affected them. Because I was 17 and I was in shock and disbelief. My high school sweetheart and I, even though he saw what happened, I still was like, maybe our friend isn't dead. Like maybe you saw it happen, but maybe he still is okay, And so I was just kind of wrapped up in all of that. And I think my parents were trying to stay strong for me, and then maybe behind closed doors were letting out their emotions. But yeah, as I matured and I think went through my stages of grief, and then I did realize like how traumatic that had to have been for them, thinking like, wow, I almost lost my daughter. And just the fear that my mom saw as I was running towards the house. And my dad trying to rush home, and they had blocked off the neighborhood.
Oh, he was at work? Or
he was at work.
Okay.
And so he was rushing home, and they blocked off the neighborhood, and they weren't letting him in. And he was like, my daughter's in that school. And if you know my dad, he has like a gruff voice, and that's just his voice. He's an ex-Marine, so he's kind of, so I think he got out and had some words with him. There may have been some threats. But he got through, so I'm not quite sure how or what happened. And so, so, after I worked through some things and matured, I realized just how traumatic that was for them, and that they obviously had to work through their own grief, and as well as just dealing with the loss of my friend that they knew so well. I mean, I went to elementary school up to high school with him, and as well as my boyfriend that was always around, and what he witnessed and what he went through as well. I mean, that was traumatic for them as well. And I think that's the only time I've seen my dad cry.
Oh, wow.
He went over to our kitchen table, to the chair that my friend and him like always sat at, and would talk about the Marines because he wanted to be a Marine. And he just went over to that chair and just kind of tipped his head down and cried. And like I said, I've never seen him cry. So,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I think one of my favorite days of working at this company was when we had a gig in Denver, and you and I got to go back and walk the memorial that they've set up over there.
Yeah. I think it was like there was snow on the ground, and I had never seen it.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to be able to experience it with you.
I didn't know what to do. Like I can tell you this now. I was kind of scared going there because I don't know anything about what it feels like to have gone through what you went through.
Right.
And so I don't know how to handle then going with you to this place where I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
I'm good with feelings and emotions. I totally am.
But like if I would have lost it or...
Well, what do you need from me? Like
right.
I didn't know, who do you need me to be in this moment?
Right.
It's, I don't think before I speak, but there I thought a lot before I said anything. So I'm like, this is your experience. I got to be part of it with you just walking through there. But I honestly didn't know how that would turn out, but it was the most beautiful day because you got to share that, but I also got to watch you way later when you had become this powerful, just a powerhouse with us, but a powerhouse human being.
Yeah.
And to go from like the day that happened to the day that, that kind of bookended for me, whereas like I've known you in what you had gone through, and now I know you and your conquering of those things.
Yeah.
But that was a big moment. What were your feelings when we were there?
I don't know. I was nervous. I was happy to share it with you, and I've only shared it with you. I haven't been back and seen it again. So you're the only person I've shared it with. And I'm happy that it was with you. I had heard and seen pictures of it, that it is just a very peaceful place. So that's just what I expected it to be, and it really was. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. So once we kind of got up to it, I just felt good and at peace with it, and that was it. I enjoyed it, and it was just, I think we were pretty quiet and just sort of.
Yep, just taking it all in.
Took it in.
Yeah.
And just,
that was super deep.
Yeah.
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 What when people have circumstances happen to them, and there's a wide array in humanity of the things that can happen, especially to a kid, right? And I'm always fascinated and I've learned a lot on this podcast from people based on this, but when some people have something happen and they, over the course of years, turn it into something amazing, and they become, largely accomplished, and they become just great members of society, great humans, and other people go down completely different roads and things don't work as well. So two people can have the same experience and yet come away totally different. And then, of course, with this, it's over time.
Right.
It's not an immediate, like, oh, we're okay now, everything's good.
Right.
You're awesome. But what's that process for you from that moment and getting back on your feet because you got knocked down? So what's that, if you remember, like, what was the process of getting back up?
I've thought a lot about that because I compared myself a lot to the other students. And often thought, well, what's wrong with me? Just because, I moved out of state a year later. And I chose to homeschool my senior year. And quite a few students did, more than like the media let on, or that just in general, I think the community knew about. For me, they kind of like they moved the library and rebuilt it, but overall I was just like, I don't know how the students can go back into the school and just go about day to day and their education. Like, for me, it just didn't make sense. Just those memories and like going back into the classroom where I'd last seen my friend that was killed, and like those last memories, and I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I found it disgusting. And I did try for a couple days, and I was like,
So you did go back in.
I did.
And it was too much.
And I was just like, I called my mom and I was like, I'm not doing this. And she's like, okay. And so we did find somebody that was like kind of the in-between person. So she would bring me my work and then deliver it back. So I was still enrolled, so I could go to the school dances if I wanted to. So I did graduate from Columbine, and I did like walk with the,
At the actual graduation?
Wow. Yeah. So I was able to do that. And of course, they named all the people that didn't survive, and that was really nice. But again, so I questioned a lot, like, well, what's wrong with me that all these students were like, we are Columbine, and just went back super strong and proud to be back, and we're stronger than ever. And I was just, part of PTSD is, detaching, and I very much detached from everybody. And it was lonely and it was isolating, but that's just all I knew to do. But I also went down this path of just being like super responsible and organized, and I always kept myself super like put together. I didn't follow through with my plans of like going to a university. I ended up going to a community college for a year, and then just being living so close to the school, and you'd see these people like doing like tourism stuff and sticking their kids on top of the Columbine sign and taking pictures.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I can't live here. And I told my parents, I was like, I gotta go. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm gonna do, but I can't live here anymore. And they just said, let's go as a family. And, my mom is originally from Spokane, and she'd always kind of wanted to come back this way. And my dad was able to find a job in Vancouver. So this is kind of where we landed.
Wow.
And so that was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed. And I'm sure other people did, but it's just, keeping in touch with a lot of students on social media.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them still live in the same area. A lot of them got married and had kids way sooner than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And their kids attend Columbine. And I don't personally understand that.
Right.
So again, I just compare myself to others. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why does that make sense to them and not me? But that's just how I cope. And
so that's always running in the background of what's wrong with me? Why am I the one? Even though you're just dealing with it differently than everybody else does, you think that the story you've told yourself is, must be something wrong with me because everybody else is still Columbine strong.
Yeah.
And I can't
and
be.
I'm just not. Like, I've never been back to a reunion, and I don't care to. Like I said, I do keep in touch with a lot of people on social media, and that's been nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any interest in like attaching myself to that.
So for you, it was time and it was detachment. And then as you're getting into the work world, into the business world, I'll just say this. When you first started working here, and I'm trying to remember how many years you were here.
So I can't remember if I started 2012 or 13, and then I left in 17.
It was 12 because that's when we launched the Coop.
Yeah.
And then
So
it's
12
still 17.
to 17.
Yeah. I remember when you first got here, it was the transformation I saw in the years that you were here. When you came in, you were young and you had gone through this Columbine thing. It was like something that you kind of wore at the time, where that had attached itself to you, and it was something that's heavy, totally understandable. As you became everybody loved you, right? Everybody still does. But as you became somebody that was an influencer within the company, that was an influencer outside in the mortgage world, where people knew they could reach out to you, that you would get stuff done.
Right.
It felt like I got to watch you find confidence during those times.
Yes.
Is it just, like, I keep thinking back to, like, what was it? But was it just you kept proving to yourself that you were amazing? Or were you just like, hardcore, let's just work and get this stuff done? Like, what is it inside of you during that time that built that up?
I think it was finding a job that fit and that I loved, and being able to just throw myself into that and finding a new identity other than just the girl that went to Columbine. And just connecting with new people that I enjoyed, that didn't just see me as that. And honestly, like, having you as a mentor.
Aww.
And you just really believed in me, and you showed me that, and you really taught me about being confident in myself, and about self-love. And I do think that had something to do with it. So I really did grow as a person and in my job. And I did learn that I could kick ass. And I did love my job and with you. And I did start therapy during that time. So
that helps. Everybody needs a therapist.
Yeah. So I think starting to work through some of that, since I've learned that other stuff came out that I needed to work through, but I just didn't realize it at the time until I had my son. which was only 3.5 years ago. So different things come out.
Ever.
He is the cutest kid ever. So yeah, I got married later in life, had my son later in life, which I do think also has something to do with what I went through. I just think I needed to be sure I was as healthy as possible emotionally before having a kid. Just so I don't, I'm sure I'll mess him up in some way, right? But just so I didn't put that all on him, and
it's interesting because you said, like, I was the girl that was in Columbine, and I think you mentioned earlier that your everything can be blamed on this big event, right? So all the things that happen, like you can kind of link it back to that. And you said you had done some work where you're like, maybe there's other things that were also happening that were in play.
Yes.
So you've learned to not just look at a big thing and then attach things to it, but actually to open up and go, okay, maybe there's things that are about other issues, right?
Yes,
or other things
very much so. And all that came out after having my son, which was really interesting. It all just flooded in.
Why? Like, what happened? Was it just...
I think because it was things from when I was a child. And so as soon as I had my own, it just made me look back. And a lot of it, it all just clicked. It was like, okay, so this is why I react this way. And it wasn't all Columbine. And this is why I get defensive with people, or I handled situations this way, and I'll think back on them and say, gosh, I wish I would have explained myself differently or handled that differently, or I could go back and talk to that person and explain myself, or, and that wasn't all Columbine, so it's been really interesting, and it's really made me grow a lot. And I really think I'm like such a different person now, and happier, because obviously Columbine impacted me a ton as a person, and I was 17. So that was just very confusing. And I think it just sort of stunted my growth and my maturity, and I was just confused on where to go and who to be. And but then after having a child, it just, there were other things other than Columbine, and some of the things that I had issues with, family in particular, was just pushing it all on Columbine. You need help because of Columbine. You need help because of Columbine. So when I seek therapy, all I was telling them was Columbine, which I absolutely did need to work through, because I was having the common things with PTSD. I was having the flashbacks. I was having the nightmares. There were so many things triggering me that I absolutely needed to work through. But so it's just very interesting.
So I always think of like what viewers and listeners take away from these conversations. And I think one of the big things I'm picking up is when a big traumatic event happens, which there's so many people with trauma. Like trauma is a big deal. And you go through these stages in life where, like, you're young and things are fun, and then all your friends get married, then all your friends have kids, then all your friends get divorced. We're kind of there. Not all your friends, but and then you start
especially during COVID.
Oh yeah,
it was like divorce. I'm like, what is happening? Yeah.
And then I think we're at this stage where people, like friends, are looking back at past traumas and starting to go, hey, where did this, I wish it was earlier in life we could do that, but like looking at it now and going, okay, what can I attach to this? And then what can the takeaways be?
Yes.
What I'm hearing is anybody with past trauma, it's not a quick turnaround. It's a constant work in progress.
It is 100%.
So always going, okay, how else can I grow, or how else can I answer these questions that are deep down from my past, or how can I process through something? It's not an overnight thing. It's just part of the experience you've had as a human.
Yes.
And you've got to figure out, okay, who should I be talking to make those things right? Because you're doing it healthy, right? You're talking to a therapist instead of, diving into any sort of pick your arena that people fall into after bad things happen, right? As a mom, how has it changed your momming so far? It's only been a few years, but has your past trauma made you go, okay, protect, protect, protect? Or, because I can imagine I would just be in protect mode of what happened to me. Like, how do I make sure that nothing bad ever happens? Like baby in a bubble style.
Yeah.
But you're free. I've watched you with him. He's hilarious. And I watched you kind of keep an eye on him, but he gets to go around and be himself.
Yes.
And so is that on purpose?
Yeah. My husband and I have talked a lot about that. So yeah, when he falls at parks or wherever, we let him be just kind of a monkey, and he's very active and he's very daring, and if he falls, we don't baby him. Like, we know the cry if he's very hurt, and of course we go tend to him. But if he falls and he kind of is like, oh, ow, we're like, you're good. And then he just gets up and keeps going. We don't run and baby him. And sometimes we get glares from other parents at the park, but we just want him to get back up and know that he's good. And the same at home. Like, he touched a lamp that we told him he shouldn't with the light bulb, and he
once
zapped himself. He goes, oh, I at myself. And we're like, what did we tell you? We told you not to, and he won't do it again. Like, we warned him and he did it. So,
you're intentionally not
always
being there, making sure he never experiences anything bad ever.
Yeah, because he needs to learn. But of course, we know the cry if he's not okay. And of course, we tend to him and make sure he's okay. I mean, we're definitely not letting him do crazy, dangerous stuff. We are making sure of that, right? Like, we're very aware and keeping our eyes on him. We're not like letting him just wander around super dangerous places. But yeah, we're trying not to just keep him in this bubble. I'd say my biggest fear that I have tried my hardest to work on in therapy, but after I had him, I still cannot help it is when he goes to school. I'm terrified.
Really?
We could talk about the statistics and all of that, and I don't really want to get into it because, we do hear about a lot of school shootings happening, and it's because the media just puts it out there, and, it's happening a lot and it's terrible, but statistically it's still not the most common thing in terms of gun violence and whatnot. But it's my reality. It happened to me, so it obviously can happen, and so I am terrified to send him to school.
Yeah,
and I think I will be every day that I send him. So I just don't ever want him to feel my fear. I don't want him to feel scared of going, because he shouldn't. So I don't know, I don't know when he should know my story, because I don't want him to feel scared. And he should never feel or see me feel that sending him to school. So if I could just keep him home for the rest of his life and homeschool him and keep him in a bubble in that way, I would. But my husband said, well, no. You need to go back to work soon, and he needs to live his life and be social. I'm like, well, there's co-ops, and there are days that he can be social, and he's just like, no.
So as you look back, what could people have done differently, or what would you have liked people to do? Because I'm thinking, as these things become more common, the big question is, what do you do to help somebody going through it? Or what do you do to, if you've got somebody that's gone through something traumatic, what's the best thing somebody can do?
I mean, obviously having a good support system surrounding you, which I did. And having somebody educate that support system about the stages of grief and allowing that person to go through them, which a counselor did that for my parents, and they recognized those and allowed me to go through them, and just sort of sat back and watched and kind of let me do them, and then were there when I needed them. When I was in the anger stage, I did some really strange things.
Oh, really?
Like, there was a bag of chips on the counter, and I just threw them on the ground and stomped all over them and walked out of the room.
Just randomly?
Randomly. I was just pissed off. Oh, and they were like, okay.
We're in the anger stage.
Yep. And they were like, all right. Like, I would have never done that. That's like so strange.
Yeah.
But
it's not rational, right?
No,
These
not
are
at
all
all.
emotions that you're going through.
And I would have never behaved that way. Right. That was not, it was so bizarre. And now I laugh about it. And they were just like, all right, we're just going to clean that up. We're not going to say anything about it. So those things happened. But it still didn't really make a difference at the time. And there were grief counselors at churches that were there to kind of help support you, that we kind of took advantage of. But it just, everything was so raw and confusing, and you were still in such shock and fresh that none of it really sunk in and helped. So I guess just a good support system, honestly, to just
being there when the person's ready.
Yeah. For whatever you need, which could be anything. Like, if they want to go on vacation right away to get away, which we did do eventually. I think we went to San Diego or something, just to get away and get your mind off of it. If it's just like, let's go get treats, like anything, I don't know. Some people might want to get into therapy right away. That definitely was not what I wanted to do. But there was a counselor that kind of helped my mom through some things and educate her on some things to watch out for. Because when my boyfriend was shot, he was very, I don't want to say needy, but he was very much like, I need Andrea like 24/7. So at first, there was no room or time for me to grieve or process anything for weeks and weeks and weeks. He just needed me around him 24/7, to the point where his mom had to ask my mom, can she just stay overnight? Like, he cannot be without her. So I had to like go stay the night and sleep on his floor. And then at some point the counselor told my mom, like, this has to stop. She needs her time to process. So
that's interesting. So your whole beginning of your processing grief was help somebody else and be who they needed. Yeah.
I was taking care of him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember, were you always like that before then? Were you the one who would take care of people, or is that what triggered out of that moment?
No, I was. Yeah.
Wow. And now, I mean, you've really made an awesome life for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, things have gone, with a lot of work, you've gotten things to where they've gone, gotten better and better. Do you find yourself mentoring other people, or, finding people who need, your help, or, being there for people because of what you've been through?
Somewhat. I don't know that I feel I'm still working on myself and feel like I'm improving every day.
So that's never done?
No,
Dang
never.
I hate it. I have too much character already.
Yeah,
I don't need any more character.
But I feel like I'm in one of the best spots I've ever been, for sure. And I am no longer the girl that went to Columbine. It is and always will be a part of me, but it does not define me. And you know, it's just not the first thing people are going to know about me. You know, people say time heals all wounds. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I just think time just helps you, it lessens the pain, you know, it doesn't heal it, but it just makes it a little bit better. Yeah, you can just deal with it, and
not full healing, but always a process.
And it gets better and better and better. Like I'm at a point, I keep in contact with my friend that was killed. I keep in contact with his parents, and they come and visit once a year. And in particular, now that I have a son, they always want to come and see him, and they send his Christmas presents and birthday presents, and they're in town now, but they're kind of traveling around, and then they're going to see us in a few days. But when it first happened, I kind of had to detach myself from them. It was just too close to home. I didn't know what to say to them. They are some of the strongest people I know. And now we have such an amazing relationship that we can just hang out and not even necessarily bring him up. And if we do, it's fun and funny stories, and we can just laugh about them. It doesn't have to be sad. And that's, you know, that's coming a long way. That's amazing. So,
well, I can tell you that it's been so much fun to watch your journey and what you've done. I don't see you as the girl from Columbine. I almost didn't ask you to share this story because I didn't want you to go back and be that girl for people, but I've seen you grow into this woman that's so awesome that I felt like it was okay to bring you back to that story of what had happened.
Yes.
And then use that to show who you are now, all the things that you've been through, and that you've created this life for yourself that's totally different than that experience. So I almost didn't have you share the story because I know you as so much more than that. But
right.
I do think that it's so powerful for you to have shared this, for people to hear this, and for people to know people go, you know, so many people go through different things, and it's just a matter of the course of life and grow through the process. So
yeah, it is. Because every now and then I'll share it, and then people will be like, I would have never guessed that. And I'm like, good.
Yeah. Good. Because you've come so far.
Yeah.
And found all that strength.
Yeah.
Dre, thank you for sharing. This has been really, really big. I really appreciate you being so open with this. And I'm super proud of how far you've come.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.